Welcome to week 4 of The God I Wish You Knew. My name is Mike, and I'm excited to talk to you about this idea of God doesn't matter versus God is important. How do you know when things matter, when something matters? It's really when you can't live without it, right? Food matters. I'm a big fan of food. You probably are too. I love food. Mexican food, Italian food. I'm a big fan of food. Food matters. We need it for life. Water matters. We need to be able to drink. We need to be able to nourish our body and have fluids go in our body. I'm an iced tea guy, and so I consider that kind of water because it's a mix, right? But water matters. Purpose matters. Something maybe that you can't feel or touch, but it matters to know that you have a significance, you have a purpose, that you're doing something that actually matters. Relationships matter. It's great to be in relationships, whether they're friendships or they're romantic relationships or you're dating or you're married. Relationships matter. And love matters. To be loved and to know that you have someone to love, it matters. Now, usually when we say things like God doesn't matter, it usually is when things are difficult and when things are hard. And if we're honest, life does get hard, doesn't it? Circumstances rise. The water seems like it's going to drown you, or wherever you're at, whatever you're involved in, life can get hard. And what I have found, and maybe you have found this to be true, in my life and in the lives of those around me, is that it's easy for us to say, man, I don't know if God really matters when things are really painful, when things really hurt. And what I've discovered for me, and maybe this is true for you, is that it's easier to change your beliefs than it is to change your behavior. And when things get difficult, it can become easy to just go, well, I don't know if I believe that anymore. Because when things get difficult, it means that there's action that you have to take. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you know that it's important to grab a hold of him and trust him and know that he is with you in difficult moments. Jesus talks about this in a moment that a guy named John writes down in John chapter 6. And he says things like, don't work for things that spoil and work for things that endure. He says, my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up in the last day. He also says that I am the bread of life. He's communicating to the people that are listening that their choices matter, and that your decisions matter, and that your purpose matters. As these people are listening to Jesus, and they're recognizing what's going on in their lives, and he's encouraging them to make wise decisions and that the things that they do matter, they start to get restless in their heart. And in John chapter 6, verse 60, John records this. On hearing this, many of the disciples, the followers of Jesus, said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Because again, it's easier to change your beliefs than it is your behavior. And then Jesus responds to that. In verse 61, he says, does this offend you? In verse 63, he says, the words I have spoken are like spirit. They're like life. And yet there are some of you who don't believe that. Verse 66, he says, from this time forward, the disciples turned back and no longer followed. Because, and I'll say it again, it's easier to change your beliefs than it is your behavior. And they heard these words of Jesus, and they were like, man, this is a hard teaching. This is becoming difficult, and I just don't know if I want to lean into this anymore. I don't know if I want to be a part of this anymore. Man, it is easier to change your beliefs than it is your behavior. And so Jesus has some dialogue with his disciples, and he asks them a question. He says this, do you want to leave too? Do you want to walk away? Because they've walked away because this was hard. Do you want to walk away? And Peter, and I love Peter, he's one of the main followers of Jesus, and maybe you're familiar with his story. But Peter stands up and gives him an answer, and he says this, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And the question really that he brings up is a question we have to ask us. When things get difficult, when things are tough, we may think that God doesn't matter, but really God is important. When we start to wrestle with that, we have to ask the question, where else will we go? If Jesus isn't for us, then where else will we go? Because if you're not going to give your life to Jesus, you're going to give your life to someone or something. And some of the solutions we come up with is maybe self-help. But we both know that the self can't help. Things get difficult, and when things get difficult, how are we supposed to help ourselves? We're always looking for ways to do that. That's why there's a self-help section in every Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. You can search for it. Maybe we go to, I'm just going to be a positive thinker. I'm always going to think positively about life. And that's a great character quality to have, but it's hard to be positive in a lot of brokenness around us, right? That we only know that that's going to last for a time. Or maybe you've said, okay, well then what I'll do is I'm just going to get what I want. I'm just going to go search after what I want. I'm going to pursue what I want. I'm going to step on those who are around me. But you and I both know that that's not sustainable. And then another thing that we do is we look for a different religious system. Hey, I'll become this, and then I'll be satisfied. I'll go practice that, and then I'll be satisfied. And here's the truth about every other religious system, is that you never know where you stand, and you're right back to where you started again. Which is why Peter goes, Jesus, where else are we going to go? You have the words to life. You're the Holy One of God. At Active Church, we believe that Jesus is who he says that he is. That he died on a cross, and that he rose from the grave, and he has defeated our sin and our death. That he was a real person who really lived, really died, and really resurrected. Peter put it this way: we believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. And so where else are we going to go? Because we can go to somebody else or we can go with somebody else, but they're not going to satisfy us like you, Jesus. They're not going to give us what you give us. You have the words of life. You give us godliness. You give us grace. You give us love. And we're not going to find it in anybody else but Jesus. Man, what Peter says is brilliant. And notice what he says. He didn't say, you have the answers for all life. He says, you have the words of life. Because there isn't a promise in the Bible that says, with every circumstance that comes your way, you're going to be able to answer why. And it's going to be an emotionally satisfying answer. I mean, you and I both know if you've lost somebody, or if somebody has turned their back on you, or if somebody's walked away from you, or whatever might be the case, you and I both know that there's never an emotionally satisfying answer to why. Why did they pass away? Why did they get cancer? Why are they hurting me? There's never an emotionally satisfying answer. So what Peter says is, you have the words of life, not the answers of life, which means this: the words of life are the words of Jesus, where he says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'll never turn my back on you. I'll never walk away from you. I will go with you through this. Jesus can sympathize and empathize. Sympathize being, hey man, I'm so sorry that happened. Empathizing being, I know how that feels. That's the God that we follow. That's the God that we love. And he says that I have come so that you may have life and have it to the full. We can always decide that God isn't important because life can get difficult, but the God I wish you knew is important. And he's so important that it matters to your life what you do with him, because where else are you going to go if Jesus isn't in your life? The God I wish you knew is important, and he has important words for your life, and he wants to bring life change to you. That's the God I wish you knew.